Chapter 11. L.A. Police Interview Number 999, Cynthia Harland. Ronald Dixon didn't stay the night. He wanted to. He drove Cynthia Harland back to her apartment with all the intentions of staying the night and getting an early start in the morning, but it hadn't worked out that way. Cynthia's mind was centered on Glenn and the ride she wanted from him. Her mind remained at the Brown Derby, while her body faced Ronnie, who poured himself a stiff jolt. He kissed her twice, then, with little or no response from the girl, he set his glass down on the bar and started to remove his trousers. The move brought Cynthia out of her daydreams. "Not tonight, Ronald." He looked at her, amazed. His eyes went wide. "Not tonight? What kind of talk is that?" "My period just started." "You were all right a few hours ago." "It just started." She got up and moved to him, then put her arms around his neck and kissed him briefly. "You'll be down again next week, honey. Everything will be all right by then." "I won't make it for 3 weeks. I've got to leave for Washington." "I want you bad, honey." "You know how I am this time of the month. We'll just have to postpone it. There's nothing I can do, Ronnie." The man reluctantly fastened his belt again, then took his drink down in one gulp. "You sure you haven't got somebody else coming in?" He indicated the bathroom. "I still remember the nightgown." Cynthia shrugged as she poured a quick drink for herself. "Stay and see for yourself. I'm not telling you you can't stay. I'm just saying there is nothing I can do for you tonight." The entire statement was a lie, but she simply didn't want another affair with the man. She wanted to be fresh and alive for Glenn when he arrived in the morning. She didn't want to have any memories of the older man and his miserable idea of a jazz session. Ronnie looked at the back of her head studyingly for a long moment. Then he sighed and tried for a smile. It was a weak smile of disappointment, but he said, "All right, honey, if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. If you had somebody coming in, you certainly wouldn't want me staying around." "All I want to do," she said as she turned to face him, "is to get out of this tight dress, into a satin nightgown, and get some sleep. You know, I had 4 days at the studio this week, and they were long days. That's probably what brought my period on so suddenly. That and your jazz earlier. I'm tired out." "Sure, Cindy. Sure, I know how it is." He put on his suit jacket, then reached to the inside pocket where he took out a billfold. He counted out several bills and laid them on the bar. "You'll need some things while I'm gone, and the rent will be due before I get back." She brought his head down to hers, and her hot tongue darted in between his lips. He drew himself tighter to her, and she felt his manhood rising rapidly. She pulled slowly away, keeping a warm, glowing smile on her face. "You're so good to me, Ronnie." Ronnie crossed his legs hurriedly. He had to hurt himself in order to lower his heat-excited body before he could walk. Cynthia knew his problem, so she lifted her drink to his lips, and he gulped some of the stinging liquid. "Good night, Ronnie," she cooed. Silently, he walked to the door, and without looking back again, he was gone. Cynthia giggled silently, then reached behind her to unfasten a hook. She pulled down the zipper and let the dress fall in a circle about her feet where she left it. For a brief moment, as she finished her drink, she thought about taking a bath, but she found she was tired, and the sooner she went to bed and fell asleep, the sooner time would pass, and she would know the real secrets of the man who would possess her. She let the strapless slip and brassiere fall on top of the dress, then walked into the bathroom to select a nightgown. She took a long time in selecting just the right one from a wardrobe of many. After all, she knew she would still have it on when Glenn arrived in the morning. It had to be just right, and the matching negligee had to flow in billowing clouds. But even after she was between the ivory satin sheets and the light was turned off, sleep did not come easy. Glenn's handsome face haunted her conscious mind. Her hips moved rhythmically with anticipation. She suddenly crossed her legs hard. It had to be saved for Glenn. Everything had to be saved for Glenn. Chapter 12. Glenn Marker's Confession, Tape. I sat in the bar of the Brown Derby until I felt the place closing in on me. Its soothing, dim lights and the many double martinis had my vision swimming, but the note Cynthia had left me remained clear. I had not folded it again since the moment I'd picked it up from the floor. I studied every letter of the lovely handwriting. There was no doubt she wanted me, and I wanted to be with her right at that moment. I'd found myself hating the fact she was with another man, and the thoughts of her naked in bed with the guy brought fire to my neck. I hadn't been so close to wanting the death of someone in many months. I don't even know the broad, I realized to myself. Why would I want her guy out of the way like that? Out of the way, maybe, but not out of the world. Then I found myself grinning at my thoughts. "First time I've seen you smile in hours," said the bartender as he brought another double. "First time I felt like it in hours," I grinned, then pulled the martini in close and toyed with the glass stem. I finished off the cocktail quickly, paid my tab, and with a friendly goodnight to the helpful bartender, I left the Brown Derby and walked to the curbing where I hailed a taxi, and soon found myself back in my hotel room. I looked several times at the whiskey bottle on my nightstand, but better sense kept me from taking any. Whiskey and gin didn't mix, and I knew it. Perhaps I was whiskey and Cindy was gin. How would we mix? It appeared she wanted me, and I was certain I wanted her. But just how would the two of us mix it up together? I slipped a pink nylon nightgown down over my naked body, then put my body prone on the bed with my hand under my head. I stared up at the ceiling without turning off the lights. The glow of the gin shot distorted pictures on the ceiling, but they were all of Cynthia. I quickly erased any thoughts of the gray-haired man she was with, but even at those times I realized I was a newcomer on the scene. Cynthia was a beautiful girl, and she must have many men friends. I was lucky to possibly be included. But again, how would we mix? I let my hand slip momentarily down the length of my body, over the soft nylon of the nightgown. What will she think about this? I questioned myself, half aloud. My mind raced back to Colorado and Red. She had been one hell of a girl. There were many times I missed her. Red had gone for me no matter what I wore. But always I remembered the syndicate, and they would be looking for me. I had to get out of the country as soon as possible. There was still the fact I wanted the operation which would kill my manhood once and for all. Which brought up a thing that troubled me greatly. How would it really be when I was a girl? I had a great love for sex with girls. But when the operation made me a girl, there would be no girls for me. Unless I went to lesbian love, there would have to be men. Of course, there had been a few in my past, but they just weren't my cup of tea. I knew that girls' clothing was the only real love in my life. Thus, I wanted the operation which would make me as much a girl as possible. It was the entire reason I had broken with the syndicate in the first place. But what of my sex life then? What of a different kind of sex life than I had ever known? I felt I would be a good-looking girl. After all, when I was dressed completely as Glinda, the mirror certainly told me I lacked nothing for looks. The operation I demanded of myself couldn't change my outward facial appearances. But would the operation change my mind in any way? Could it possibly bring me to the fact that I would forevermore be with men? If there was to be any time with Cynthia, she would have to know. I had always heard that the movie people were attuned to all sorts of people, and Cynthia was with the movies. She'd understand. I hoped she would understand. But if she didn't, then it was just so much water over the hill. Tomorrow would tell the story. Tomorrow would tell just how long I would remain in Hollywood. What the hell? I could come up with a phony birth certificate for my passport. That was also something I would need. A passport. Never having had one, I didn't know how long it would take, so the sooner I got onto it, the sooner I could take off when the time came. Sleep came hard for me, but when it came, I slept soundly with the light on. And when morning came, it was one of the gray mornings Californians had grown to know and accept. I slipped lazily out of the pink nightgown and let the cloud of material drift across the bed where it would remain. I shaved very close and showered thoroughly, then drenched my body in a light cologne before I dressed. Moments later, I was in a taxi heading for Cynthia's apartment on the Sunset Strip. Her note had said to call, but what the hell? If she wanted me, she'd take me the way I came. So it wasn't noon. It was only 10 in the morning, but it would be closer to 11 by the time I got there. The guy would have to be gone by that time, if she wanted me to call at noon. I rang the bell on Cynthia's door at 10:30. I rang it several times before a sleepy voice from the other side asked, "Who is it, please?" Glenn Marker." "Oh!" It was a gasp, and for a moment I thought the guy might still be there. But a moment more, and her lovely voice spoke again. "Just a minute, Glenn. Let me get my negligee on." I couldn't hear her move off, but I knew she had gone from the immediate vicinity of the door. She wasn't gone long. I braced up quickly when I heard the night latch being taken off and the door opened. "Hi," I greeted with my best grin. "Hi," she answered with an inviting smile. Then there was a long pause as we looked into each other's eyes. Finally, I made a futile motion with my arms. "Do I come in, or do I stay out in the hall?" "Oh, I'm sorry," she cooed and backed away from the door. "Come in, Glenn, please come in." I moved swiftly, and she closed and locked the door behind her. Then she leaned back against the door and watched me as I moved across the deep carpet of the apartment. I turned again to face her as I reached for a white, fur-covered divan. "You're as beautiful as I remembered you," I reflected. "And you must still be blurry-eyed from the martinis you were drinking last night. I haven't even washed my face or combed my hair." She let her hands run up the side of her hair. "Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder." "So it would appear. I thought you were going to call me at noon." She slowly started to cross toward me. "That's what your note said, not what I said. Besides, this way was much faster." She stood directly in front of me. The fragrance of her perfume drifted out through the pink nightgown and negligee, and I thought quickly of my own pink nightgown, which lay on the bed back in my hotel room. Soon the housewoman would be in to make up the bed, and there it would be. So what? So I had a girl with me. I laughed at the thought. "Something funny?" "Yes." "Not me, I hope." "Of course not. Maybe sometime I'll tell you." I reached down and gently pulled her head to me. She did not resist. Rather, she lifted her own arms and drew me tightly to her, and the kiss was long and wet and hot. Our tongues met, and I liked the feeling of her lipstick smearing over my own lips, and the soft velvet of her tongue feeling out each taste bud. When we parted, I let my hand slip down to fit over her snug hips, and she followed my move with her own. "Who are you, Glenn Marker?" she breathed as she buried her head on my chest. "Just a guy you met on the road." "That goes double." I lifted her head again, and our lips and open mouths met again. "I get the idea," she sighed when once more we parted. "I got it hours ago," I grinned. "Who was the guy last night?" "I told you I'm a kept woman." "So you did. Did he stay last night?" "I got rid of him." "You should have let me know." "How? Besides, I didn't know I was going to get free. He can be difficult about such things sometimes." "I bet he can." "He's a lousy lay." I wasn't sure if I liked her direct approach, but what the hell. She was a lovely piece if I'd ever seen one. "You sure don't pull your words, do you?" "Should I?" "Not that I can see." "Time is so short. Who wants to beat about the bush? I don't care where you came from, Glenn Marker. You must have heard that the Hollywood crowd is a fast crowd. Now tell me that you didn't." "If I did, I'd be lying through my teeth." Our lips pressed, fused together again. Our bodies melted as if into one. I realized immediately that everything she boasted up front was absolutely real. And in the same thought, I let my right hand drift smoothly, easily down into the front of her nightgown. The soft globe which supported a hard nipple greeted my hand with the warmth of promise, and I squeezed it tightly, first one, then the other, until the girl moaned with the delight of expectancy. "Take your clothes off," she muttered through our tightly pressed lips. Now, take them off." I didn't like to be naked with my women. I wanted a nightgown, some kind of girl's wear. It gave me, always, that extra stimulation I demanded of myself. But how could I go about it? Without taking my lips from hers, my searching tongue explored hers. I unbuckled my trousers and let them fall to the floor. Then she unbuttoned my shirt with searching fingers. She did not look to see what she was doing. Her lips were still fused to mine, her eyes closed. Then her groping hand felt me through the thin pink nylon panties I wore. Her eyes snapped open, but she did not jerk either hand or her lips from mine. It was a slow movement. First her lips drifted a few inches from mine, and she looked down. "Oh no," she sighed. "Don't tell me I've hungered this long only to be cheated." "Only if you want to be cheated," I remarked seriously. Then she removed her hand. "I'm from Hollywood, remember?" she replied. "I know about such things." "Then you should know what I am." She turned from me and made her way to the bar. "I go to the bars on the Strip." "What's that got to do with it?" "Whiskey?" she asked without looking back to me. "It's kind of early." "It's never too early in Hollywood." "Good. Then if whiskey is what you're having, whiskey's good enough for me." She poured 2 straight shots and brought one back to me. "I go to the gay bars once in a while." Then you should know the difference between a transvestite and a momosexual.
Just how gay are you?
Why don't you wait and find out? She eyed me carefully, then downed her whiskey.
I know the facts, the difference. I know the butch girls, the gay girls, the stags, the street trade, you name it, and I know it. I don't know any drags that go for girls, real girls, I mean. I don't know that any can give satisfaction guaranteed. Oh, some talk a good game. They get up here, and all they want to do is lay around in my clothes.
She waved her hands in frustration as she walked back to her bar and poured another straight shot.
All night I thought about you. I've had it with guys like last night. I sure expected something out of you. She laughed. And there you stand in your panties. Man, oh man, am I about ready for the rubber room at the Happy Farm.
She slugged her whiskey again and poured another. I didn't touch my drink. I walked across the room and put it on the bar, then walked back to where my trousers lay. I reached over and started to put them on.
There I stand in my panties, I said. She snapped around. Why do you do that? You might just as well go all the way. You look like my things might fit. I even have a few wigs on the dresser in my bathroom. There's 2 closets full of clothes in there also, and the dresser has all the little dainties you'll need underneath. You see, I come fully equipped for all my trade. She tried for anger. It wasn't working. But I had taken enough. I crossed to her and slapped her a resounding blow across the face. The smack knocked her first against the bar, then she spun off and landed in a white fur-covered chair. For a long moment the girl was dazed. Then her hand went to the sore spot on her cheek. I've never taken that from anybody.
You just took it, baby. Nobody laughs at me.
I never took that from anybody, but there's never been a drag that's done that before.
What you have on will be good enough.
What?
Just what I said. I don't need to see your closets, maybe a wig, but the nightgown and negligee will be enough for the time being.
Dazed, she leaned forward in her chair. I only wanted a good romp in the hay. I had planned so hard on it.
I won't be laughed at.
I didn't mean to laugh. It was all disappointment. I honestly didn't mean to laugh.
I reached for the bottle and poured a second shot into my glass on the bar. Then I tossed in a piece of ice, which I took from a small refrigerator behind the bar. The stinging but cool liquid took some of the red from my face.
I certainly meant to dip you. She rubbed her cheek. That's apparent.
Slowly, Cynthia got to her feet and crossed to the bar. There was something puzzlingly different about the man who stood there. She had never been a masochist or a sadist in all her life, but for some strange reason, she didn't mind the hard slap from this guy. There was something she couldn't understand. It was so easy to read her thoughts. I eyed her for a long moment, then reached over and poured her another drink. This may take some of the sting out of your cheek. Cynthia took the drink.
Hope it takes the black out of a black eye. I can't work all week if you gave me a black eye.
You won't have a black eye. I know where the punch is to land.
Professional?
You might say that.
Professional lady smasher?
Among other things.
You don't look that way either.
But I do look homosexual?
She blushed, deeper in red than the spot where the slap had brought a rush of blood under the skin. Your panties caused that remark. She let her hands rub over my bare chest. Your chest should tell me different.
But it doesn't, is that it?
I don't know. It's strong enough. She looked up into my eyes again. You're certainly built there. You might be different.
Want me to take my pants off again?
I was determined in my love and in my words. It wasn't so much that I wanted to get into her pink nightgown and negligee. After all, I had one at the hotel, which was almost its duplicate, except for the material. I would have preferred something else, but pure determination held me by the groin, and I knew the sooner I got something of hers on and did something for her, the sooner the girl would know she had a tiger by the tail. Will you go through with it? She turned her eyes away from me again and picked up the drink from the bar.
You think I won't?
Most of them don't.
I'm not most.
Nightgown and negligee?
While your body heat is still in them.
That helps?
In a way.
What way?
Why do you keep talking? Why don't you just wait and see? Lay down and enjoy it. Pull out the stops and go at it. Like you said before, time is too short. Now is the time, and here is the moment. You want to spot the action, or just talk about your lost love affair?
And if I don't like it?
I put on my pants and go home. You put on your nightgown and negligee and go back to bed and have a good cry.
You're awful. You even hurt with your words.
You'll never know until you try.
Want a drink first?
I have one.
I unbuckled my trousers and let them fall to the floor in front of the bar, and once more I faced her in my pink panties. She looked to me slowly. They're almost the same color as my nightgown and negligee.
They're not satin.
That matters?
Not really.
She slinked out of the negligee and let it drift over one of the 3 bar stools. Her eyes never left mine, and I could see she felt my own heat building. All she had to do was look downward to my pink panties and she would know it. She took another sip of her drink, then let each dainty strap of her nightgown come free of her shoulder, and the nightgown fell to her ankles where she stepped out of it. She let her right foot come up slowly, and the nightgown remained hooked over her pink fur-covered mules. I unfastened it, and quickly let the gown slip over my naked body. I hoisted the negligee, and my arms easily found the sleeves. I tied the long streamers tightly at my neckline, and even without the wig, I knew the transformation was astonishing to her. Glinda watched Cynthia remove her own pink panties. They matched the outfit, she said, and handed them across. Glinda slipped out of the nylon panties and put the pink satin ones on in their place. "What do you call yourself?" asked Cynthia quietly, her eyes narrowing in the burning lust she had begun to feel. "Glinda. Glinda Satin." "Satin. It goes so well. Glinda Satin, in satin. The professional part I was telling you about. It fits. I have satin bed sheets." "We'll get to them," she grinned. "Perhaps more often than you think right now." "I'm looking forward to it, but I'm not counting on anything right now." But her eyes belied her inward emotions. Her breath had shortened, and she wet her lips much more than was necessary. Glinda knew from that moment Cynthia had been with girls before, and she would again. She went with men, and she went with women. After all, Cynthia had implied it all herself. She was a professional in her own right. The one who could pay the highest was her man for the night, no matter what sex they might be. L.A. Police Interview number 999, Cynthia Harland. Glinda reached up to pull her head down again, but the kiss was short-lived. Cynthia put her arm around Glinda's waist and led her into the bedroom where, a moment later, she had adjusted a blonde wig to Glinda's head, then stood back breathing in eager anticipation. No matter what Glinda looked like in drag, she was strong. She reached over and picked Cynthia up bodily and carried her to the rumpled satin sheets and carefully put her down. Then they were together, and their lips were once more fused together. The time was at hand, and the kaleidoscope of colors started between them almost immediately. Cynthia knew from the outset she had been wrong. She had almost let Glinda go without a try. Glinda was like none of the others. There was a color to her Cynthia never knew, not the black and white of most drags. Perhaps she had been wrong about some of the others she had let drift out of the apartment in past months. Glinda was near perfect. The soft lips on her breasts, the biting teeth on her nipples, the investigating hands which found every facet of her body. And when those hands found the facets, they turned them on full force. There was the tip of the tongue hitting her navel base, and the valley of untold secrets. There were the hands which ventured into the unknown and came back with all the pleasures of Shangri-La. And the kaleidoscope of color and sound burst forth with organ music which drifted from wall to wall, then repeated itself until the resounding sounds burst from the bed to the ceiling, then melted through the bed and bounced back from the floor. A ringing slammed into her ears, and she wanted to hear the ringing over and over again until it would burst her eardrums. Her hands clawed into real skin, taking with it bits of satin strands that could never be replaced. She didn't want anything replaced. All she wanted was Glinda and her searching tongue, fondling hands, and violently thrusting manhood. The pink clouds opened up, and the blue sky threatened to overtake them both. But the thunder and the lightning blasted forth with a force she had never experienced. Her eardrums broke, and there was only silence as the colors melted into a glowing darkness. If she was dead, Cynthia knew she had died happy. But she was not dead.
The pleasure hurt remained too long after the silence and the darkness had closed in, and she felt the stilled body so pleasantly heavy over most of her body. Only dreams remained. Glenn Marker's confession, tape. Only dreams, for a longer time than either of us desired. It had been a rough tussle in which Glinda had become the violent aggressor. Glinda had to prove to Cynthia how wrong she had been. She would never say to Glenn again, "There you stand in your pink panties." Never again would she think of me as a homosexual. From that moment on, she would be looking forward to our next session. And those sessions would be frequent and demanding. But for the moment, Glinda was pooped. She had fought so hard with every trick of the trade she had ever learned, used, or dreamed of, and she knew the girl beside her was satisfied to the fullest extent of her dreams. "What do you think now?" Glinda finally found the breath to speak. Was all the girl could mutter. But her hand went to the tender spots between his thighs. Glinda still wore the panties, and the nylon was hot and moist. Her hand circled the soft nylon caressingly, left to right, right to left, up and down, and instantly she knew Glinda was once more aroused. And Glinda tip-tongued the nipples of the girl's breasts after she had lowered the strap of her nightgown. The girl weaved slowly on the bed like a snake in heat, with little moaning sounds coming from her lips. They were both tired from the first jousting, but not so tired that the sensations of renewed life were not forthcoming. Glinda raised her bright red lips to those of the girl, and the girl whispered into her mouth, "Maybe some whiskey will help." Glinda breathed the words back into the girl's mouth. "It would only kill things even more. Give it all time. Time will take care of all things. Just give it time." And she planted her moist, hot tongue deep in the hidden recesses of her mouth, her throat, and in return the girl let her own love-maker circle round and round. The heat came on like a flash, and the girl's hand continued its movement in changing directions over Glinda's panties. "Oh, baby," she moaned as she felt Glinda swelling and throbbing. Her own legs began to twitch in dainty little ripples, ripples she could not and did not want to deny. With her free hand, she took Glinda's from her stomach and moved it down between her thighs, where again it drifted through the valley and the meadows where only lust dwell. With her free hand, she took Glinda's from her stomach and moved it down between her thighs, where again it drifted through the valley and the meadows where only lust dwell. She had no panties on, but her skin was as moist and as hot as were the panties of Glinda. Glinda liked the feeling. There was so much the feeling of comfort and well-being, of still secrets which might be told. But Glinda knew that the male part of her would not completely respond for a while. There was only one thing left to do, and she wanted to do it that way very much. She had never wanted to do it that way as much since the session with Red so long ago. But Cynthia had so many of the qualities Red had had, and they were both professionals. Perhaps that made much of the difference. And in the same vein, she had rejected Glinda on the first sight of the panties and chemise. Both, from past experiences, had been left with much to be desired from the drags they had met. But both soon learned there was a difference. Glinda wanted Cynthia that way, and she slowly pulled the nightgown up over the girl's body until it rested at the neckline just above the breasts. Once more she let her tongue dart over the nipples, then took the full mounds into her mouth and wished they were her own. She took such a long time with each of the breasts, making them moist and wet, so wet that her lips had a hard time keeping any form of traction. And the traction was so necessary for the full pleasure, Glinda bit into the first one and then the other, until the girl below screamed in pain, but she did nothing to pull the torturous instruments away. Instead, she pulled Glinda's head even tighter to her, so tight that the hair of the wig fell to cover the entire upper portion of her body. She liked that feeling also. Many times she had been with lesbians, and even the ones who did have some sort of long hair never gave her the sensation that Glinda gave her. Glinda let her tongue finally leave that portion of her body, and it took a long time, so very long, in its slide down the length of her front. And when it was below the girl's navel, she moaned. All the joys of a home run thrilled her. She never wanted to stop now, and she threw her thighs high in the air to meet every move. She had to meet every move, or she would lose some of the pleasure. And Glinda thrilled with every stroke. Soon, all too soon, it would be over, at least for that moment. Then a little later, it would be Glinda's turn. Throughout that portion of their session, Glinda knew she had a tiger by the tail also, and she would know her business. Some pros were as bad as most amateurs. Not so with Cynthia. It was no wonder she lived in a $300 a month apartment, and Glinda knew the wardrobe would be one as expensive and in as good a taste as Glenn had left in New York. Perhaps it was not the exact rules of the book that such thoughts raced through anyone's mind while in such a position, but it was those thoughts which gave Glinda all the power and sex-provoking demands which pleased any partner she might be with. Without the clothes and without the thoughts, there would be only another set of flesh on flesh. Anybody could do that. It was the little deviations which made it all so worthwhile, so demanding that each would rather remain in bed than do anything else in the world. And there would be so many more nightgowns and negligees. Glinda was in a dream world. Chapter 13. L.A. Sheriff's Department, Officer's Report number 1291, Deputy Sergeant Terry Mahoney. Terry Mahoney checked into headquarters just before 8 o'clock that Saturday night. He went through his regular routine, then, before checking out a squad car, he stopped in the ready room for a cup of coffee, which he had just started to pour when a uniformed officer came in. "Just looking for you, Sergeant." "What's up?" "The chief wants to see you. He's in his office." Terry nodded his acceptance of the order, but took his time in drinking the hot coffee. Then he ambled his way through the substation to his superior's office. He didn't bother to knock. Those formalities were left to polite actors in motion pictures. If the chief wanted to see him, then the chief damn well wanted to see him, and there would be few formalities. Terry's superior was a man almost as big as Terry himself, and as if the police department lived on coffee, the man was sipping from a big mug, which he replaced to his desk as Terry came in. "Want some coffee?" "Not now, Claude. Just had one." The chief lit up a long cigar. "What'd it look like to you on the strip last night?" He blew out the first gust of smoke. "Same as usual to you?" "Nothing's been the same as usual for weeks." "That's the report I get. How many of the punks do you think are roaming the strip these weekends?" Terry seated himself in a large leather chair near his superior's desk. "Thousands, maybe more. Never did stop to count them. Just one big mob. We've had them in here from all over. Pasadena, North Hollywood, Ventura, Bakersfield, Palmdale. You name it, and those characters come from it, and right here to our little old strip. Dirty clothes, long hair, sweaters that even the Salvation Army wouldn't accept, and most of them teenagers. You get them secondhand, Claude. I'm out in the field, remember?" Terry folded his hands over his stomach. "You and I both know that anybody who wants to can buy anything they desire on the strip. One connection leads to another, and the connections aren't hard to find." "Hard to find? They go out and drum up their trade these days. We pick up one, and there are 50 to take his place." The big man leaned forward in his chair and put his elbows on the desk. "This LSD craze is going to cause us a lot of trouble. It's going to put a lot of those kids in the cemetery." The chief nodded his head. "But before it does, they're going to be taking such trips as we couldn't realize." He leaned back in his chair again, and his eyes narrowed. "Matt and Rail were attacked by about 10 of them last night, all hopped up on the stuff. We got most of them, and we'll get the rest. But 10 is a gang." "2 can be a gang." The chief nodded again. "Sure, 2, 3, 10. I don't think it's going to stop at 10. A mob. And more." "That's a riot you're referring to, Claude." "That's what I'm referring to. It happened in Watts, and it can damn well happen here. Somebody wants trouble on the strip, and by God, they'll do everything in their power to see that trouble happens." "That sounds political." "Call it what you want, Terry. But my guess is it's more than a bunch of kids looking out for a wild time. The stuff is too easy for them to get. Couple of the punks we picked up last night never had the stuff before, said they were talked into it. Then, when they were on their trip, they have no recollection of what happened. They could have killed Matt and Rail with their tire irons if the action hadn't been spotted by another of our prowl cars. There is much more to it than a few pushers trying to get the kids hooked, thereby having another client. Most of those kids don't have the cash for their espresso, let alone lay out the kind of cash the stuff costs. I grab 'em every time I get a chance, but the new hands-off laws aren't making it any too easy. I know, Terry. We've got to be careful. But we've got to protect our own first. And don't take any chances with the girls either. They're as bad as most of the boys. And a hell of a lot of the time, you'll find in reality a lot of the girls are really boys. They put on the capris and the fuzzy sweaters, and with the long hair, who can tell? You'd even have a hell of a time getting them for masquerading. They don't wear falsies, or if they do, they get rid of them before being searched. And they don't wear panties. They don't wear nothing. That goes for the real girls. They get flying high and don't even want to take time in lowering their panties. They lift their skirts behind one of those saloons and have at it standing up. These days, you can't tell one from the other. It's their constitutional right to dress as they damn well please. The only way you're gonna tag anything on them and make it stick is if they're disturbing the peace. That's not hard to grab 'em on. I've been around a long time. Lots of things constitute disturbing the peace. Claude puffed heavily on his cigar. Which is just about what I mean. Grab 'em, only grab the ones who are on a trip. I want to know more about it. I want to find out just what is going on. I didn't like what happened last night. It's the first time any of them went that far, at least out here in our territory. And Terry leaned back thoughtfully, remembering the threat he had so recently received. They would be pushing him into a car one of these nights, and Terry knew the creep had meant it. He leaned forward in his chair again. I know what the bums look like when they're traveling on that stuff. I've seen them enough. I know you do, Terry, but I don't want any of my men traveling alone for a while. I've handled the Strip alone in my car for a damn lot of years. That's an order. You have anybody in particular you'd like traveling with you for the next few weekends? They're all good men. Gilboy. Do you know Don Gilboy? By sight, nothing more. Young fella. I've had him prowling the joints as one of the crowd. Take him with you tonight. He might be able to point out some of the creeps you don't know. Some of them who are real tight on the stuff. You're the chief. The businessmen on the Strip like you. But don't take any chances you don't have to. Their buck in the pocket always seems to come out way ahead of friendship. Most of the slobs I'd like to see right here in the lockup. Terry stood up. Anything else? Only to repeat that I don't like what happened last night. Keep your eyes wide open tonight, and remember what I said about the girls and the ones who only look like girls. You know the gay crowd. You can differentiate between the gay crowd and the muggers and the slobs. I know them. Terry closed the door almost silently, then checked out his vehicle. He knew Gilboy, and would pick him up at one of the Strip dives along Old Sunset Boulevard. And as he drove along the gaily lighted boulevard, he couldn't help but think what the greats and the near-greats would say if they could come back from heaven or wherever, and look at the street of their playtime as it stood now, where once all the fabulous nightclubs expounded their bright lights and great talent. There was little more than creaky joints which shouted of topless waitresses, pizza, and beer. There had always been the gay bars where the homosexuals of both sexes gathered, but there had never been the joints where the kooky crowds gathered, or the beatnik joints, which called loudly for the teenagers from all over the countryside. Other than to squelch a fist fight between a Bogart and somebody who wanted to take him, or small fights between starlets, there had never been the mass arrests he had witnessed and been a party to during the recent months. What would they say? He mumbled half aloud, then saw Don Gilboy ambling along the street near Denny's place. Terry pulled the car out of traffic, and with the motor running, he stopped near the disguised officer. "Gilboy," he called softly. The younger officer looked to the car, then crossed to it. "Hello, Sergeant. The chief says for you to ride with me tonight." Without another word, the young officer got in beside Terry, and the sergeant put the car into motion again, back into the steady stream of traffic. "Anything buzzing?" "Something, Sergeant, but I can't lay my finger on it yet. But something's up. There's double the bunch on the street tonight." He indicated the sidewalk and the throngs of teenagers and young adults. Then he let his hand drift to the creeping traffic. "You ever see so many cars, even on a Saturday night?" "You heard about Matt and Rail?" "I heard." Glenmarker's confession. Tape. It was dark before either of us made a move to get out of bed. We had gone through 3 sessions during the afternoon, and we both had simply passed out. The only movement of muscle was to pull the satin sheets up over our worn bodies. Then our eyes closed, and the next thing realized was the darkness of the night and the pounding of traffic on the boulevard outside. "Prove my point?" grinned Glinda when Cynthia opened her eyes and rolled over. Cynthia sighed, and her hands searched out the instrument of her love lust beneath the covers. "Honey, Glenn, or Glinda, whichever you like best, you can have me any time and in anything you want to wear." She let go of me and rolled over on her back. "Want to go out and drag tonight?" "Is it safe?" "I wouldn't suggest it if it wasn't. The cops don't bother the drags much as long as they're minding their own business, and the cops aren't just looking for somebody to pick up. Besides, listen to that traffic out there. Friday and Saturday night, there are so many on the strip, it would take the whole damn sheriff's force to even start rounding them up. The boys with the long hair have made it easy for your kind." "Then why not? It's been a long time since I've had the opportunity. A long time." "Then you must be starving for it." Glinda rolled over to look at the girl. "How do you know so much about my kind?" "There's nothing so tough about that to answer." She turned to look directly at me. "I've had all kinds in my short lifetime. That includes the drags. I told you that before. Of course, I've got to admit the ones who went through with the sex act, and there were few, were never anywhere near as good as you. And I don't know any of the straight ones that were as good as you. But I've had the drags around me for years. Clothes are the most important thing to them. Half the time they come up here, and I get them all dressed up, and first thing you know, they're at it by themselves in front of the mirror over there. What the hell, I get paid. I'm a whore, Glinda. A high-priced one, but a whore no matter how you screw it." "I wish you wouldn't say that about yourself." She grinned. "All right, darling. For you, I won't say it again. But you know how I feel. Anyway, about the drags. I never met one yet that wouldn't give his left tit to parade around in drag on the street. That's all there really is in life to them. You may be the best there is in bed, no matter what you wear, but you're no different when it comes to appearing on the street in girls' clothes." Glinda leaned back on her pillow again. "Well, you have me there. I certainly can't deny that. You're really going through with that bit about having yourself changed into a girl, like you told me earlier?" "The minute I get a passport and get going." "I'll miss you. There's no doubt about that. Ships that pass in the night." "You say the craziest things sometimes." "I only say what I feel." "Is that why you said you loved me when we were off on Cloud 9 this afternoon?" "Well, you know." She laughed delightfully. "Of course I know. I've been on Cloud 9 too many times to take anything a man says seriously at a time like that. Man, we were gone, gone, gone." We were silent for a long time. "I better get back to the hotel and pick up something to wear if we're going out." "Why in the hell do that? I told you this morning I've got 2 closets full of clothes and a whole dresser full of everything else. And if you don't like the blonde wig, I've got a brunette and a black one. And I bet my shoes fit, too." "I'd hate to ruin anything of yours, Cynthia." "Cindy. I like Cindy better." "What's to ruin? We're not going with the cocktail gown set. The creeps out there are in capris or sweaters and skirts, something I've got plenty of." "You're the boss." Honey, you are." And Cynthia reached down under the covers again. "And you're not ready for anything yet." "I'll tell you one thing I'm ready for." "Shoot," she giggled. "Sorry I said that." "I'm ready for something to eat. I haven't had a thing all day except that whiskey. That only brings on the appetite." Naked, Cynthia shot out of bed, and a moment later, Glinda heard the girl moving around some pots and pans. "No sooner said than done," she shouted back to her before she reached the bedroom door. Glinda grinned as she heard the light noises from the kitchen, and by the time she had taken a quick shower, Cynthia had a large pan of ham and eggs which she served up. Glinda hadn't bothered to return the nightgown to her body, but she did slip into her own pink panties and a white quilted satin robe she found on the back of the bathroom door. We both ate hungrily and almost silently, and when we were finished, Cynthia simply piled the dishes in the sink. "They can wait until later," she said, and opened the belt from around her robe, which she had gotten while I was in the bathroom. "Always put off today what you can do tomorrow," I grinned as I stood up. "Only tomorrow never comes." She led the way back into the bedroom. She looked to her watch. 10:30. Things should just about be getting started. "You're dressing me. What do we wear?"
That's all according to the mood you're in. Does Glinda wish to be a hard broad or a soft girl?
Glinda has never been a hard broad.
Blonde, brunette, black?
Blonde.
Okay, she replied, then went to the drawers of her dresser, and after browsing through it, she came out with a pink Angora slip-over sweater. She put it on a chair, then again turned to the drawer and took out a green Angora cardigan. Slacks or a skirt?
Naturally, I prefer a skirt, but for the first time out, slacks or capris.
Capris we'll have. She took matching pink and matching green capris. I think you'll like the pink. Do you mind if I go in green?
Pink is fine with me. And it wasn't long before both of us were dressed in the dainty undies and the soft outer sweaters and capris. Cynthia affixed the black wig over her own long hair, and after selecting lightweight matching jackets, we left the apartment.
What about the elevator boy?
What about him?
It'll be your test.
I almost grinned at my own question. How many times had I appeared before elevator boys, or anyone else for that matter, and had never been questioned? It had been something I thought I should say, and as I had surmised, the only look either of us got from the elevator boy was one of pure fascination, of longing to have either one of us in bed. We entered upon the crowded Sunset Strip, and Cynthia led our footsteps in the direction of the most action.
You'll have to do the leading, cooed Glinda. I haven't the slightest idea about any of the places.
We had moved along with a throng of what appeared to be teenagers of both sexes. There was hardly shoulder room between one and the other.
I've got a few favorites. Not far from here, or we'd have taken my car.
What good is the car? I like to walk.
I like the click of heels on the cement.
So do they, Cynthia grinned, and indicated 3 drags in cocktail dresses and fur wraps as they passed us and moved on ahead. They're certainly not making any bones about what they are, I grinned as I watched the 3 gay ones swish broadly along the boulevard, chirping at the top of their lungs.
Why should they? It's like I told you in the apartment. The cops aren't gonna bother them if they don't obviously make a complete ass of themselves by bothering somebody else. But I'm glad you're not the swish kind.
In my business, I couldn't afford to be swish, even if I wanted to be.
Just what is your business, Glinda?
Not now. Sometime, perhaps, but not now. We were quiet a long time, except for occasionally when Cynthia would point out some club which would be of interest to me, or some sight she thought I might want to see. But all in all, her tone became more and more quiet, as if she was sensing something laying heavily in the air over the Sunset Strip. Then, when she was silent for an even greater time, Glinda looked at her.
You're mighty quiet all of a sudden.
There's something I don't like.
With me? Of course not, darling. Just something in the air. I don't know what it is yet, but there's something in the air that just doesn't smell kosher tonight. The Strip isn't right tonight. Maybe we'd better hit it back to your place for the night and leave this for another time.
Glinda was not frightened, but there was still the Dalton Van Carter murder hanging over her head. There would be no doubt but that the Los Angeles Police Department would have circulars on the affair. I certainly didn't want to be picked up. They would know within moments who I really was, and even if I got out of the Dalton Van Carter affair, there was always the syndicate. That's all I needed, was the syndicate to find out where I was.
No, we're safer moving with the crowd right now. If something's cooking, we'll duck in someplace.
What can be up?
This mob is angry. Something feels like it's about to bust loose.
Then let's get off the street now.
All right, Denny's place is just up ahead.
Cynthia pointed to the beer joint, which was only 2 doors along the boulevard.
It's a real gay joint. Nobody's gonna bother us there. Most of the nicks never go in the gay joints. They have their own hangouts. Nicks? Beatniks.
Glinda looked around. There are plenty of them around. She took Glinda's arm lightly, and we moved into Denny's place, and we took a seat in a booth near the rear of the establishment, where, across the room, an unpleasant-looking girl, all dressed in red, was sipping her first martini of the evening. Glinda had caught a quick glimpse of the red outfit, and remembered his Colorado girlfriend. But that was as far as the recognition went.
Chapter 15. Warden's Note. The killer in the red dress could hardly keep from choking on the martini. It was the second night in the bar, and there was the prey. Who could miss Glinda? And it was more than convenient.
Glinda was wearing Angora, her favorite material. Throughout the day, the killer had worried about a fact of recognition. What would Glinda be wearing? Would the makeup be different? Would the wig be changed? Glinda was exactly like her picture, not a hair out of line. And there was the same smile the picture had shown. Pauline had not failed, and the syndicate would be avenged. Before the night was out, the killer would have done the job and be back on the airplane in the beloved night spots of New York. At no time had the killer liked the Hollywood scene. If he wanted beatniks, he could go to the Village in New York. He didn't have to attend the gay world on the Strip to find them. Soon he would be on his way home to the life he understood and the people he wanted to be with. It would be so easy to reach into the red plastic purse and take out the small .25 caliber pistol and drive 2 or 3 slugs into Glinda's head from that distance. But there were too many others in the bar. The screeching queens and the loud butches, along with the quiet fags. The killer would have to wait, bide his time. But the opportunity would present itself, and Glinda would be out of this world. When he realized he would not choke, the killer slugged down the martini and slapped a topless waitress on the fanny as she was about to pass him by. It was the same girl he had encountered the night before. LA Police Interview number 1212, Shirley Cross, topless waitress, Denny's place. "Another double?" she asked with her toothy grin. "Yes." Then a funny thought struck him. He took the girl's arm lightly in his hand before she could turn away. He indicated Glinda and Cynthia across the room from him. "See those 2 goyles over there? The ones in the Angora sweaters?" "Of course. You think they're like me?" Glinda's makeup was perfect. The waitress studied both Glinda and Cynthia from a distance for a long time. "You must be out of your mind." "Then what are they doing in a place like this?" "We get lots of people in here, gay and otherwise." "Think they're otherwise?" 2 girls? Could be the girl lesbian looking for the boy lesbian. We get all kinds in here." "Give them a drink on me, but don't let them know where it came from." "Get your money." The waitress brought the killer his double martini, then, so as not to tip her hand, she went back to her bar and put the 2 other martinis on her tray and crossed to Glinda and Cynthia. The killer grinned silently, unnoticed by anyone else, to himself. He was getting his kicks. He knew his prey, but Glinda didn't have the slightest idea that the vulture was so close. Warden's note. The killer could hardly contain himself. He was that exulted at his good fortune. He wanted to get at his work, and he wanted to get at it soon. Damn that waitress. Damn the good looks of Glinda. Glinda could fool anybody, but a damn fool waitress could see through him. The killer didn't like any part of that. The killer wanted the pretty Glinda off the face of the earth. He wanted Glinda found on the street or in an alley, and when the morgue people lifted the skirt and took down the panties, there would be more than revenge. He only wished he didn't have to kill Glinda outright. Just wound her a little so that the cops or the nurses would add the final touch of embarrassment. Glinda had never been found out. Damn her to hell. The killer finished off the second double in one gulp, but he kept Glinda and Cynthia in the corner of his eye. He would not remove them from his vision if his life depended on it. He knew his life did depend on it. He ordered and got another martini. The darkness of the small joint blurred his eyes at times, but he wasn't going to let the effects of any alcohol cheat him out of his fun. But he wanted another, and another. He cursed the 2 girls silently because they were staying too long. He wanted them on the street where he could use the gun, or the switchblade knife, which was also in his purse. He bided his time in the interesting thoughts just as to which he would use, the gun or the knife. How very much he would like to get close enough to Glinda and look in her beautiful eyes and slit the knife directly between the perfect falsies. He bided his time in the thought of how the sponge rubber of the falsies would soak up the blood, and how he wished he could have one or even both of them for souvenirs. Which would it be, the knife or the gun? Only time and the opportunity would give him the answer to that. If it was the knife, it would find its way directly between those phony tits. If it was the gun, then there was only one place Glinda would get it. Right in the head. 2 or 3 quick ones right in the head. LA Police interview number 1212, Shirley Cross, topless waitress, Denny's place. The killer giggled to himself as the waitress brought him another double martini. "You're giggling," she said. "That's a dead giveaway." "You mind your own business." The killer's eyes grew hard. He could just as well send that girl into the unknown along with Glinda. But he changed his tone almost immediately. "What did they say? Those two girls I sent the booze over to." "Not much." "I didn't ask you that. I asked you what they said." "Of course, they wanted to know who sent the stuff." "And you said?" "An admirer, that's all. Just somebody who liked them. And the girl in the green Angora sweater told the other one she thought one of the lesbians at the bar was trying to make out. You know. I think if they decide to put their mind to it, they'll make it out." The killer's face twisted in anger again, and the girl knew she was in for a bruise if she stayed in his vicinity, so she turned and hurried back toward the bar. Warden's note. How dare they speak of lesbians was all that suddenly raced through the killer's mind. He'd give them the lesbian bit. After all, didn't he appear to be a girl? They could have him any time they wanted. It wouldn't be such a bad idea getting Glinda in bed with him for a time before he used the knife between those perfect phonies. Glinda might give quite a good session. She must have given that Dalton Van Carter quite a session. No one got close enough to Dalton Van Carter to kill him unless they are damned good in bed. "The bitch!" screamed the killer silently into his fresh martini. "She'd take one look at me, and I'd only be a piece of dirt to her, the rotten bitch. Her and her pretty face. I love girls' clothes just as much as she does. Where does the bitch get off thinking she's prettier than me? Wouldn't have a date with me, would she? Well, I don't want no date with her either. I came out here to kill her, and that's what's going to be done. Kill her, and she'll never know what hit her. And she'll never know I even thought of giving her the benefit of my body. She'll go out never knowing I existed." He emptied the glass again, and the waitress quickly slipped another in front of him and retreated. The killer toyed with the stem of the glass, and his mind's eye could conjure up in a reflection of Glinda and the pink Angora sweater in the clear liquid. Too bad that beautiful sweater has to get blood-stained. I wish I could get her where she'd have to take it off. I'd do what I did so long ago. I'd dress in those beautiful pink things, and I'd give her one hell of a jazzin'. And when she was about to pop the stem, I'd blast her right between the eyes, the queer bitch. That's what I'd do. I'd strip her right down and make her look at it in the mirror. I'd make her die looking at the male body she really is. That would be the thing that would put the fear of horror in her guts. Make her die like the boy she really is. I wouldn't even let her look at any girl's clothes while she died. Unless they were on me. Then I'd let her look. The killer slopped a good portion of the martini over the table as he traveled it toward his lips. Chapter 16. LA Sheriff's Department, Officer's Report number 1291, Deputy Sergeant Terry Mahoney. Terry eased the police patrol car in toward the curb near Denny's place, then stopped but kept the motor running. "They're out for blood tonight," he mumbled as he surveyed the milling mobs of teenagers mixed with the beatnik groups. "Think that's what it is, Terry? It's the only thing it can be. Look at that mob over on the corner, over there." He pointed. "You ever seen them around the strip before tonight?" Gilboy looked the group over carefully. "That's a new bunch to me." Terry changed the direction of his pointing finger several times more. And there, over there. It's the same way along the whole mile and a half. Last night's action clinches it as far as I'm concerned." He paused and lifted his radio phone, but for the moment did not snap it on. "We tag any one of them tonight, and I hate to think what will happen." "Like in Watts?" "Like in Watts. Maybe worse." "Can anything be worse?" "Before this night is over, we may damned well find out. I don't like what I feel, and I damned well don't like what I see. These kids usually mind the police when they're told to do something. The kids, maybe, but not the toughs you see around here. A lot of the kids in Watts used to mind the police too, but when the riot started, everybody got into the act." He snapped on the radio phone, and when headquarters cleared in, he said, "Let me talk to the chief." There was a long, silent wait as Terry refused to take his eyes from the sidewalk and the crowd. Then the chief came on the wire. "What's up, Terry?" "I smell riot weather, Claude." "You sure?" Just as sure as I can be, before something actually starts it all off. That's pretty sure on my part. I'll get more men in the field right away. That would be my advice. From where I sit looking out the windshield, I'd say we have an imported load of professionals. As bad as that? I had the same feeling in Watts when we went down to help out the local department. Claude buzzed off a moment, then came back on the wire. Okay, I gave the order. The men will be on the street in 5 minutes. I'll ride car 16 if you want me. See you on the Street of Dreams, Terry quipped as he snapped off the receiver and hung it back into its place. He looked to Gilboy. Where's your pistol? Under the sweatshirt. He lifted the sweatshirt to reveal the handle of the snub-nosed .38. Keep it handy. Then Terry reached under the seat. He handed Gilboy 2 apple-shaped objects. You might need some tear gas. Use it rather than your gun, unless the gun becomes absolutely necessary. There are always a few innocent citizens who get mixed up in these things. I'd hate to see them spend Sunday in the hospital, or the morgue. Okay, Terry. You have a sap? Lined in along the back of my belt. Get it clear. Put it in your side pocket where you can get at it mighty damn quick. You might have to crack some skulls before they can crack yours. His eyes narrowed as he looked across the street to another bunch who were ambling around the corner of Laurel Canyon to enter upon the Sunset Strip. Those are pros. They know what it's all about. When things start, it's not going to be easy. Terry looked ahead to the almost bumper-to-bumper traffic. Another smart move. They're moving in the heavy line of defense, the vehicle traffic, bumper to bumper, so our boys can't get their squad cars through in a hurry. What happens if our boys can't get through? Oh, I don't think we have too much to worry about on that score. There are too many lead-in streets to the Strip. They can't block them all. They block the entire length of the Strip, and we still have a couple of dozen lead-in streets from headquarters. Most of this thing is going to be done on foot anyway, if it's to be done at all. Suddenly, Terry's eyes shot to the right of his car, past Gilboy. There it comes. Gilboy snapped his eyes in that direction also. 2 sets of 4 bearded beatniks each stood facing each other. It was apparent hot words were flying at each other. That's for our benefit, shouted Terry, but we've got to take them. Watch both sides. They want us, not each other. Gilboy snapped open his door at the same instant Terry threw open his, and both men raced across the sidewalk. 2 uniformed men seemed to appear from nowhere and joined Terry and Gilboy just as they reached the gang. The uniformed men quickly permitted Terry to take the initiative. Okay, break it up, move along. Or what, cop? Shouted the bearded leader. Just snap it up, or you'll be inside looking out. A young man with hair hanging well below his shoulders snapped up and looked to Gilboy. Look, gang, the creep that's been hanging round the joints. Fuzz in sheep's clothing. Spies they got yet. Gilboy stepped up beside Terry. You heard what the sergeant told you? The leader put defiant hands on his hips. No, what did the sergeant say, Fuzz? Terry grabbed the leader and spun him violently across the sidewalk until he hit the side of the squad car. Get into position, you know the one I mean. Longhair took 2-3 quick steps across the sidewalk and roughly grabbed Terry by the arm in an effort to spin him around. You take your hands off him, Fuzz! But Terry didn't spin so easily. His elbow shot backward and caught Longhair just below the ribcage. The breath escaped through the man's gaping mouth, and he went down on both knees, with both hands frantically pumping at his stomach, pumping violently to replace the escaping air, a futile exercise at least. One victory does not mean the battle won. The victory in that case was only the beginning. The hordes came in from all sides in one screaming Indian charge. It was Custer and the Sioux all over again. Police whistles sounded from all ends. Another bunch of nicks which raced across the boulevard from the direction of Laurel Canyon came, swinging tire irons. The fenders on stalled cars fell quickly to their mercy, and the windshields crashed under the iron blows. A bus, stopped by the wall of traffic, became the target for a torch-swinging youth who hopped its tailgate. A sloppy, bearded youth pulled a sweater and skirt-clad girl whom he had been following into a darkened doorway and ripped off her skirt, while in the same motion he unzipped his fly and was taking her before she could let out the first scream. Scream or not, she couldn't be heard or distinguished from any of the other screams, and the screams of sirens as police cars tried to break through. Hopelessly outnumbered, Terry and his men put their backs against the squad car and faced the tearing mob with nightclubs. Then he shouted,
Let them have it, Gilboy.
The young officer pulled the pin and let the tear gas bomb sail into the midst of the charging mob. It stopped them for a brief moment, but none of the officers were dumb enough to think it would break them up for more than a minute, just long enough for them to regroup and come in from another direction. Every block of the area found itself experiencing the same destructive forces. Headlights smashed quickly, in violent succession, to any with a heavy object in their hand. Nothing was safe or sacred to the mob of maniacs. The call was out. Kill the fuzz! You want freedom? Kill the fuzz! Kill every last one of them! And they tried. They came at the men of the department with everything they could wield or throw. The more helmeted officers who joined in the melee, the more vicious the mob became. Then an automobile was overturned on the sidewalk from the parking place at the curb. Another girl screamed as she was tossed to the ground and her dress was ripped off. She was quickly lifted and secreted away by 3 cursing thugs, but still, not a shot had been fired. Terry knew the professional rioters had guns in their possession, and he expected the bullets to fly at any moment. But they held off, seemingly satisfied with the destructive forces at their command, with the heavy weapons they held in hand. He knew it couldn't last. The taste of blood was in their mouths, and until they drank of human flesh, they would not be satisfied. Whoever was behind the riot had picked their best men. They knew their business. In the end, Terry and his department would win. But to what end would that win attest? The screams in the night turned to cries of pain. All the pent-up emotion of the non-professionals suddenly let go. It was no longer a fight among the thugs and the police. It was a mass of swinging fists and weighted objects. It no longer mattered who was hit, as long as the hit connected with something or someone. Terry realized then, it was the beginning of the end.